In the 1930s, when the Great Depression swallowed entire cities and factories went silent, a new class of survivor emerged, not out of choice, but out of necessity. They were the knights of the road, the hobos who carried all they owned in a bundle, and learned to survive not in wilderness, but in the abandoned rail yards and crumbling alleys of industrial America. These men and women developed an entire underground system of survival, using discarded materials, coded markings, and improvised gear to make it through one of the hardest times in modern history. What's fascinating is that many of their survival hacks still work today, especially in urban environments where modern conveniences can vanish overnight. Today, we'll break down how Depression-era scavengers turned trash into tools, how they fed themselves without money, and what practical lessons we can still learn from the people who endured the hardest decade of the 20th century. The hobo wasn't just a wanderer. He was an engineer of necessity. The word hobo came to represent more than a man down on his luck. It described an entire culture of resourcefulness born out of collapse. Unlike vagrants or tramps, hobos were travellers who sought work and lived by an unspoken code of ethics and self-reliance. When money dried up, scavenging became not an act of desperation, but a skill set, a way to extract value from the discarded bones of a broken economy. They learned to turn every object into something useful. A broken bottle could be reshaped into a cutting edge by chipping it carefully on a curb. Tin cans were cleaned and reshaped into makeshift cooking pots or even lanterns by punching small holes around the rim and feeding a wick of cotton soaked in bacon grease. Clothing was often layered and repaired endlessly. An old burlap sack could become a windbreaker, while tyre rubber was cut into soles for worn-out boots. These methods still hold real-world value. In any urban survival scenario, say during a long power outage or societal disruption, scavenging isn't looting. It's skillful adaptation. Knowing how to identify metal scraps, repurpose containers, and reuse textiles can mean the difference between discomfort and functionality. A modern equivalent might be collecting aluminum cans to craft small alcohol stoves or using discarded plastic bottles as portable water filters when lined with charcoal and sand. Hobos were rarely alone. They built a loose but reliable communication system known as Hobo code, a series of simple chalk or charcoal symbols drawn on fences, train cars or sidewalks. A circle with an arrow might mean safe camp this way. A pair of interlocking triangles could signal danger, while a simple cat symbol meant kind woman lives here. Ask for food. It was the early form of crowdsourced intelligence, years before radios or the internet made sharing information easy. This system kept thousands alive. It allowed travellers to avoid hostile towns, locate friendly farms, and share essential knowledge without ever meeting face to face. The brilliance of the Hobo code wasn't in its secrecy. It was in its efficiency. The markings required only a glance to interpret, and they made communities out of strangers. Modern survivalists can learn from this networked mindset. Even in an urban disaster scenario, cooperation often outweighs competition. Establishing subtle, respectful ways to communicate with others, whether through signs, signals, or trusted routes, creates a safety net far stronger than isolation. The Hobo's approach shows that survival isn't just about gear, it's about human connection and coded trust. During the Depression, dumpsters didn't exist, but waste still did. Piles of coal dust outside factories, leftover produce behind grocers, and scrap lumber from demolished buildings. Hobos became skilled at identifying value where others saw nothing. Coal dust, mixed with water and dried into coal cakes, provided hours of burn time for cooking or warmth. Scrap tin was flattened and wired together to make crude but effective shelters. Even discarded newspapers had value, not just for insulation inside clothing, but for waterproofing when layered with wax or grease. What made Depression-era scavenging different from mere scavenging was method. Hobos developed a routine. Check behind bakeries in the early morning, visit train yards for spilled grain or nails, and scavenge lumber near construction sites after hours. They moved with purpose, never wasting energy, and always carried lightweight tools like a folding knife, wire, and string. If you want to apply this discipline today, try adopting the same mindset when dealing with waste or urban materials. Learn which areas yield useful discards. Construction zones for wood, repair shops for metal, or markets for packaging materials. Practicing value scanning in daily life can sharpen your resourcefulness long before you ever need it. Contrary to popular myth, most hobos followed a strict code of conduct. They didn't steal from homes or farms because that would destroy the fragile network of trust that allowed them to survive. Instead, they knocked on back doors, offered labour for a meal, or cooked community stews, known as mulligan stew, in makeshift camps. These stews often combined whatever scraps each traveller had, potatoes, turnips, maybe a bit of meat, into a shared meal that turned scarcity into solidarity. Foraging also played a role. Hobos gathered dandelion greens, chicory roots, and wild onions from urban lots. They learned which weeds were edible and how to stretch a single can of beans with forage greens. These same principles apply today for anyone learning food resilience. Urban foraging, when done safely and legally, can supplement modern diets. Dandelions, purslane and lamb's quarters grow in most cities and contain more nutrients than store-bought lettuce. Understanding these edible resources is a living link to the Depression-era skill set. Hobo jungles, temporary encampments near rail lines or rivers, weren't chaotic shanty towns as some think. Many were organised with cooking pits, sleeping areas, and agreed-upon rules of conduct. Shelters were often built from scavenged materials, wooden crates, tar paper, and salvaged sheet metal. The key was portability and concealment. A good shelter was one that could be built quickly, camouflaged easily, and abandoned without trace. In today's terms, that's ultralight camping with an urban twist. Building a windproof shelter from found materials teaches improvisation, using pallets, cardboard or tarps in layered construction to maintain warmth and dryness. Even modern preppers study the hobo approach because it strips survival down to its most functional form. A safe fire, a dry bed, and a plan for the next sunrise. The hobo's life was brutal, uncertain, and often dangerous, but it forged a generation that learned self-reliance the hard way. They found value in waste, brotherhood in hardship, and purpose in motion. Their hacks weren't just clever tricks, they were symbols of endurance and adaptability. When we study their methods today, we're not just studying history, we're rediscovering the roots of survival thinking. Every recycled stove, every improvised shelter, every shared meal by a campfire echoes the ingenuity of those who kept moving when the world stood still. The hobos of the Great Depression left behind no monuments, but their legacy lives in every survival manual, every bushcraft skill, and every story of endurance against impossible odds. Their hobo hacks are reminders that resilience begins with resourcefulness and ends with community. If you found value in uncovering their lessons, subscribe to Echoes of Valor and share this video with someone who respects real survival history. The past still has lessons to teach if we're willing to listen.